Welcome to Cyber Monday. Joining me as always is my friendly co-host, Mr. Dominic Vogel. Dominic.
Friendly. Okay.
Who do we have in the hot seat today?
Today we have Theresa Azari, who's a local cybersecurity leader, and she's just an amazing talent. She's a dear friend of mine, so I think this is going to be a fantastic conversation.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I'm going to hop into this chair. I'm going to invite Theresa in to sit here, and we'll be right back.
Theresa, thank you so much for taking time of your busy day to join Christian and I in studio. I know we're both looking forward to the conversation.
So good to have you.
It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on the show.
Just to dive right in, when we're talking about governance and risk, how important is that for organizations to start with the governance and risk approach to cybersecurity rather than just diving right into the technical weeds? So many organizations sort of take that approach in which they'll roll out firewalls, intrusion detection systems, technology first, but there's no forethought from a governance or risk perspective. So I guess sort of two parts to that question is how dangerous is that approach, and why is sort of that tech first approach wrong?
Mm-hmm. And it is a really great way of starting this interview because that's one of the elements that I find many organizations do get wrong.
Yeah.
They dive directly into the weeds of focusing on the technical aspects of cybersecurity without taking a more holistic view of how they should actually approach it. And when we look at organizations, many of them, they deploy extremely pragmatic solutions towards cyber attacks, towards addressing cyber attacks. But at the end, how do you know if those solutions actually work?
Right.
There's still a certain level of uncertainty. How do we know those solutions are really addressing what needs to be addressed? So when we look at from the perspective of risk management, that's where this methodology and tools come into play. It kind of encourages and forces the organization to kind of take a step back and say, okay, instead of just haphazardly deploying this solution, firewall, networking, whatever the case may be, they kind of take a step back and they say, okay, from a risk and organizational perspective, what are the key areas that can pose the greatest danger to the organization? Where are the risks that we face? What's the likelihood of that risk materializing? And then if it does materialize, the impact that it's going to have in the organization. Because we live in a world where not a lot of organizations have unlimited resources. So we need to be very mindful about where we dedicate our resources so we can get optimal results. So by taking a risk management and a higher governance approach, we actually get the best bang for our buck. Yeah. We actually get holistic view and focusing on deliverables that drive forward the business instead of just delivering security just for the sake of security.
Yes.
So it's integrated into the strategy of the business.
Definitely, and it has to be like that. Otherwise, you're going to have 10 different teams operating 10 in 20 different ways, and they're all not aligned. And if you're not aligned, it doesn't go towards helping the organization support its direction, its strategy, and its future growth.
So that sounds stressful. And I
Very
think
much.
it sounds more expensive. Correct me if I'm wrong, but having people going in a mix of directions without organization, does that not end up costing a whole lot more in terms of money and people resources?
Definitely costs not only just money, but also a waste of resources. And at the end of the day, people walk away going, what the heck did I achieve?
Yeah.
And they get frustrated.
Yep.
You hear so many individuals who are so burnt out because they feel like as if their wheels are turning, but they're not achieving anything at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So by having a better approach where you kind of line up all the pieces.
Some kind of structure.
Too structured from that sense, yes.
So please indulge us. Can you tell us some experiences you've had with companies, hopefully personally, or maybe from a distance too, don't mention the names, but that have had no structure, maybe a complete void of what we refer to as GRC, or governance, risk, compliance. What does doing it wrong look like?
Doing it wrong.
By way of example.
Exactly. Okay, I won't name the name of the organization, but I would say there are many cases where an organization will hire somebody to come on board, such as myself, to help lead their GRC program. However, despite all of the questions that occur during the interview process, and me providing them with examples of where I can help them mature along the journey. They say it's all thumbs up, all looks good. But when you come in, and when I come into that organization, you can start seeing that they're not serious about security and they're not serious about governance. All they want at the end of the day is a checkbox exercise.
Lip service.
Exactly, lip service. But at the end, you're not making any instrumental, any foundational improvements.
And then what we like to say is that compliance, even if you are ending up able to check a box, doesn't equal security necessarily, right?
Correct.
So you want to do things for the right reasons and, do them properly. So taking the other side of that, because now I get my two-part question as well. What does a nice end state look like? And I guess what I would like to do is tie that together and go, okay, what are the steps for an
Okay.
organization to get there, right? But please tell us, like, okay, everything's optimized. There's a board. There's the executive leadership team are just all involved. They're aware of their risks. Everything's assessed, and they're ticking along nicely. What does a well-oiled machine
Okay.
look like?
So for me, in terms of end state, it always goes back to governance and the alignment of what is it that the organization needs to achieve, and then how they're going to get there. And the two married together will give me the ideal state of where we need to go, because number one, there is alignment between how we actually deploy certain solutions, certain programs that we embark on, and it's alignment with the business directives and where the board and the organization wants to go. But that path isn't an easy path to go. So when we look at multiple mechanisms and tools out there, there are many frameworks that many organizations can embark on to be able to kind of help guide them along that journey. So frameworks or certifications such as COBIT 2019 or SOC 1, SOC 2, ISO 27001, all of these frameworks provides really great practices that an organization should deploy. But one of the caveats about these frameworks I find that is many organizations, they'll jump straight in and they'll tackle it like a checklist. What is it that I need to do? A, B, C, and they go down and they achieve everything. But what they always find missing at the very end is the element or lack of oversight, the lack of risk management, the lack of governance. A lot of the times the board doesn't even have a voice, or they don't even know that the organization isn't embarking on this and the rationale as to why. So I think there needs to be more active communication back and forth between the top level management, the board of directors, the executives, and the frontline individual contributors or the management team, because they're the ones who actually see the challenges. But a lot of times the board doesn't have access to these individuals. So why don't we open that floor and open that door and make it happen?
That is a really good point. And ISO 27000 is no joke. It's such a massive, detailed undertaking of a process. And, it can be going on in an organization. Other department heads, or even the board is not aware.
Exactly. Exactly. And another challenge about that is when we use a checkbox approach, people go through and they think on a very superficial level, yeah, we got this done, we're going to pass. You know what? It's not as simple as that. That is just the starting point.
Yes.
That's not the actual
This is an
endpoint.
assessment to baseline you, right?
Exactly, it's baseline, but it's not the end all and be all. It's not the gold standard. So in the back end, the organization should use that as a starting point to identify the practices that they have and where we can actually make it better. But at the end, no framework is going to help you change that. It all goes back to the culture and the mindset of the organization and the board and the executive team that leads that.
Yeah, so many good
Yeah,
things
so
to pull on.
absolutely. I was gonna say, so how, I think you hinted at the end there. How do you drive sustainability? In which, you can become compliant at any given point in time with ISO or COBIT or what have you, and I know we've seen it as well, in which organizations will go all in and then take that checklist approach, and then they're compliant, but then they really struggle with the making it sustainable, making sure that, yes, at that point in time, yes, you may have passed the audit, but
Yes.
if things just fall apart because it's no longer seen as a project, or it was originally seen as a project, rather than something which is a continuous journey,
Absolutely.
organizations really struggle with that. So, I know you mentioned culture. Are there other pieces as well that organizations should embrace to make sure that it is sustainable?
One of the things that I find very helpful is build this into as part of the DNA of the culture of the
Yes,
organization,
yeah.
and don't view compliance or cybersecurity as an abstract or as a secondary element of the organization. And we come in when things are broken and we need to help fix the matter.
Thank you for saying that.
Very
That
true.
warms our heart.
It-
Yeah.
and mine as well.
We're going to play that clip over and over. I think. It's very soothing. Sorry.
Okay. It's it's about the partnership along the way. So which is why when I help organizations deploy governance and cybersecurity, I don't come in with an audit hat and say I'm the auditor. I'm going to be the one to assess if you pass or fail.
Yeah.
I kind of give them a level of comfort, and I ease them, saying I'm here to be your partner to help provide you with any guidance or assistance that you may need, so that we can collectively reach the end point. Because we both work for the organization,
Yeah.
myself and many other members of the team. I'm not here to fail you or to pass you. I'm here just to help us guide along that journey. And by kind of changing that mindset, I find it's been very helpful.
So on the other side of that, then how can they prepare for you and best help you to do what you need to do with them as their partner?
Great question. Be honest with me. Honestly, don't try to sugarcoat your responses.
Yeah.
Don't try to prove like as if everything is working 100% perfectly. Be honest with me and share with me the challenges that you face. It's only by understanding those challenges then can I work together with you and partner together with you to kind of come up with a resolution. But if you hide something from me, I'm not a mind reader, right? You need to tell me what it is, and then let's go through that.
So honesty and transparency.
Definitely.
Very
Right.
helpful for you.
Very key. Even though people do get scared when they say auditors,
Yes.
oh my goodness, what am I going to say? Am I going to say something wrong? But you know what? Don't do that. We're not here to be your corporate cop. We're here to just be your partner and your advisors along the journey.
That sounds good.
Just out of curiosity, why, again, that is a prevailing thought when anyone in IT or cybersecurity hears the auditors coming in. Like you can, and I remember that from my corporate days. I feel the bile coming up in my mouth. It's like, why is that distrust right now? And you spoke about partnership. That is so important. Why don't, and again, we're not necessarily coming in from an auditor point of view, but why is that still not seen as a partnership opportunity? Why is there still so much distrust there?
I think it stems sometimes from the perception of what is the role of an auditor.
Yes.
We're here as an auditor. There's always a perception that the auditors come in to kind of grade you on how well you're doing and how well you're not doing. So until we're able to put that perception down, people would be unwilling to open up. So it all goes back to what you think and what you believe. And what is it that you believe is my role, and what is it do you believe is your role, and how that actually impacts our interactions.
So maybe they're having flashbacks to high school when they had a bad report card or something.
Exactly.
They're dreading that.
Don't want to have that F again.
Well, yeah, I'd like to change gears just a bit. I know you're a big proponent of diversity in cybersecurity, and I remember sharing a story with you that when I first entered industry, close to 15 years ago, my first observation was, wow, this is a real male-dominated industry, mostly ruled by pissed-off middle-aged white guys, and here I am becoming one of them. How important is it that there's broader diversity, and not just gender diversity, but thought diversity, experience diversity? Because a lot of people in cybersecurity are IT people. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, but the thing is, when you have a majority, you end up having groupthink, basically, and you're not having people from different experiences and backgrounds. A, how important is it to keep increasing diversity? And B, what are some tangible things that businesses and organizations can do to encourage greater diversity in those ranks?
Okay. And it's absolutely important, because when we look at cybersecurity and the tech world, as you said, many individuals start off in that field and they tend to be techie.
Yeah.
But there's also that risk of groupthink, and
Yes.
everybody all having the same opinion, same thought as to how things should be approached. Myself, from a very personal perspective, I do not come from a technical background. I actually come from an accounting and a business and finance background. So when I entered into cybersecurity, I was very blessed to have some really great mentors who were open to showing me what cybersecurity is all about and guiding me along that journey. And what was really interesting about that is, because I don't come from a technical background, I come to the space with a different perspective. I leverage my business insights and acumen to help address many of the cybersecurity concerns that we have. And to go back to one of the early questions that we have is, it's never cybersecurity for the sake of cybersecurity alone. It's always about how does this drive forward the business. So I found that knowledge and that foundation that I have really presents cybersecurity in a very different perspective.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
starting to really like you.
I told you,
more
I
so.
told you you would.
We're definitely going to have you back.
Thank you. I will tick it off on my calendar. But to answer your second part of your question is how do we build out this, empower this level of change?
Yes.
And there's so many ways, whether it's internally within the organization or externally.
Yeah.
So if we were to look at internally, it's that mindset.
Yes.
People who are leaders in the cybersecurity field on their teams welcome people with different experiences and background professionals who can kind of contribute to your program and don't automatically write them off as saying you don't have that background. I'm going to disqualify you immediately.
Yeah.
So internally within that, changing the mindset.
Sort of dispels the myth about that cybersecurity is an IT issue or it's just a technology issue.
Exactly.
That's a common belief, isn't it?
Definitely,
And,
definitely.
and I think, another thing is cybersecurity is thought of as a cost center. Another myth.
Yes.
How can we bust that?
Wow, that is a hard one because we're undoing decades and decades of perception of cybersecurity being viewed as a cost center. And I believe, from my opinion, I would love to get your insights about this, is it all starts at the very top.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Change the perception of what cybersecurity is meant to achieve. And for cybersecurity leaders, such as the CISO as an example, by changing that perception, we will change the roles that they play and the seat that they have at the table. We find that there's many cases where even though a CISO has a C-suite title, they don't have
Not
the
really.
same level of influence or buy-in as their other C-suite
No.
peers, where there's a CEO or the CFO.
Yeah.
So let's find an opportunity to kind of give them a seat at the table so that it's not just the security know-how that we bring to the table, that we ask for their insights on, but also their business acumen and how they can actually contribute to that. There are so many ways I can think of where we can empower security leaders and security field to kind of bridge that gap. And it's first, some areas, for instance, would be to extend the breadth of their knowledge base beyond just technical, focus on other courses that can help them develop those business skills, those business acumen. We've heard of courses like an MBA with cybersecurity focus. Why not a cybersecurity program with a bit of a business focus? Shishan, something about strategic planning, corporate finance, even how to do a budget would
Yes.
be quite helpful.
Yes.
And that allows, enables them to have that common conversation, those conversations with the other chiefs who focus, who understand business, but honestly know nothing about security whatsoever.
Yeah, well, I mean, they have to learn business language,
Yeah.
and they have to know the language of risk as well. So they're
Exactly.
effectively a translator. And I think when you say, "What do we think about it?"
Yes.
I mean, I don't want to hear us talking to them. I think that it's dangerous not to give them a seat at the table, because then you could negatively affect your organization in a massive way if some of these risks are realized. The other side of it is, at the end of the day, they can just fire their CISO and get somebody else, but the core problem is still there.
Exactly.
So why not just make that slight adjustment and give them a voice, right?
Give them a voice, but have to be open to that voice. And a lot of this may come from the very top, beyond just the C-suite table. Have the board of directors ask these questions of the executives. Does your CISO have a voice? How have the CISO and other C-suite executives been empowered to understand and portray their needs from a business perspective and not necessarily in their specific domain, whether it's security, whether it's finance, whether it's another realm.
Very good.
And on that same thing about having the boards be engaged and ask the right questions, something which we've come into quite a bit is that a lot of these boards, when they're sort of the cyber risk is presented to them, they're just nod, and the thing is that they're too scared to ask a question because they don't know what to ask. And sort of trend-wise, we're seeing more boards engage third parties to basically serve as a cybersecurity advisor to the board
Yes.
to help them ask better questions. Because I think right now there's this sort of, they're just blind faith, taking whatever the internal team says. They don't have the capabilities to ask the right questions. It's not so much the importance on the answers, but they don't have the capabilities of asking those right questions. So how important is that for boards and I suppose C-suites as well to leverage, if they don't have that capability within the C-suite or on the board to leverage a third party to be able to ask those questions? Like, is that something businesses should be looking at doing?
Definitely, and many businesses have started doing that, where if they realize that there's not enough internal skills at the board level, they will engage external advisors to come in to give them that level of guidance so they can actually ask that right question. Because by asking a question in 10 different ways, you're going to get 10 different answers. And sometimes it's actually important to be able to ask those questions, because one question can lead to the next, and if we really get to the root of where the actual issues are. But if they don't know how, bringing on external advisors or even doing their own research so that they actually become a little bit more comfortable, I believe is actually a really great starting point and a key to that level of success.
Teresa, you absolutely came into the studio and you absolutely crushed it. I don't know why you were nervous. I think you didn't have. That was an incredibly engaging conversation, and I can see that you've won Christian over as well. So you'll definitely be a future guest. But we're truly grateful for your time and the convo today. That was fantastic.
And likewise, I'm truly grateful to be invited here, because I'm so passionate about what I do, and anything that I can do to kind of bridge the gap between technical cybersecurity folks and the business element. Because at the end of the day, we all need to have great cybersecurity posture in place. And as the landscape and the business changes, we need to evolve along with it as well. So thank you for having me. I'm excited to be
Amazing
here.
final words there from Teresa. Thank you again. And Christian and I will be right back to, wrap things up on the show.
That was a great conversation.
That was epic, and Teresa's just such a wealth of knowledge. And I think one of the biggest things that stood out for me was one of her earliest points was this whole notion that cybersecurity isn't about doing security for security's sake. Right? You can't take a tech strategy first. That's not a strategy. You need to wrap that with governance and risk. Otherwise, you don't know what risks are being knocked off with your security technology. So I think that to me set the tone for the whole interview.
Completely agree. That was music to my ears. And I think the thing that stood out to me was, it's counterintuitive, but transparency from her clients is what will be most helpful. That's what and will enable them to help her help them. So thanks for watching. You can see our other podcasts on conversationsthatmatter.tv, and we will see you next Monday.